China pushes forward with its controversial zero COVID lockdown policy. A new study shows us that many of the over-the-counter medications that you are taking are linked to Alzheimer's. And lastly, another study that we are looking at today shows us that you are consuming millions of plastic nanoparticles. I'll show you how you're consuming these in just one moment. But before we get started, I'm Dr. Nick Zarowski, and welcome to the channel. Be sure to subscribe, hit that notification bell, and for all my natural health videos, go to www.drztv. You can also become a premium member on Dr. Z TV, and not only does it support me in making content just like this for you, but also you get premium access to exclusive content. Our last piece of premium content was showing you how to look at and interpret your blood work from a holistic perspective, specifically designed in order to help you transform your health naturally. So go to www.drztv and become a premium member today. So over in Hong Kong, basically, we're getting some reporting that Shanghai is further tightening its stringent lockdown measures after China's top leader Xi Jinping pledged a unswervingly double down on the country's controversial zero COVID policy, leaving millions of people confined to their home with no end in sight. There's all types of riots breaking out. People are sick of it. And I've talked on this before because it's complete nonsense to have some sort of zero COVID policy. And thank goodness if you live in a place in the world where you have freedoms, because this is the type of nonsense that you could be dealing with. It blew my mind here in the United States when I would have patients say things to me like, well, the problem with, the United States and what we're dealing with COVID is the freedom that we have, and it's like, whoa, that's a crazy statement to make, because look at the countries that don't have that, right? They're locking these people down for months and months. And could you imagine a zero COVID policy? What if we said we had a zero flu policy? What if we had a zero ear infection policy? What if we had a zero any healthcare complaint policy? The fact is part of being human is getting sick. And that's why we have something called an immune system, so we can overcome these things. And the fact is COVID is not killing people in droves anymore. It's just not happening. So when these countries are locking their civilians down, like, it's just complete and utter nonsense. And like I said, be sure that when you're thinking about your healthcare freedom, this type of thought process comes to mind, that this is where you could be. And fortunately, hopefully, you're living in a place where this isn't an issue. In the United States, we saw all types of different states take different approaches to this, and people are fed up with it, very fed up with it. So the other thing to consider here is that, if this is going on in places like China, there's a good chance that it could come to other places of the world, even including back to the United States, where they're trying to do lockdowns again. So fact is make sure that whenever you are voting or taking any type of action that could be consequential in health freedoms, that you're doing it, you're voting for somebody and supporting somebody who actually believes in health freedom. The other thing you can do is, if we are concerned about having any problems with COVID circling back through, make sure that you just have proper immune supports, okay? That's what it all comes down to. Make sure that your immune system is functioning well. Make sure you have the vitamin D, the NAC, all the things that they never told you about through the whole pandemic. Make sure you have these things on hand in order to stay healthy. I'll put links to some of my favorites down in the description below. Let's move on from this. Now, this is pretty interesting. There's a new study that says, hey, there's some very popular over-the-counter medications that people are using, and it's linked to Alzheimer's, okay? So they are anticholinergics, okay? And they're not only found in prescriptions, but also over-the-counter pharmaceutical or over-the-counter medications that people are using. So antihistamine supplements typically are going to have these, and this is things like Benadryl or chlorotrimethine, sleep aids like Tylenol PM, Aleve PM, and Unisom, and motion sickness medication, Dramamine, and various cold medicines also have this. And so basically, these different medications, these over-the-counter medications that have anticholinergics are linked to causing Alzheimer's disease. So think about that. If you go and look at some of these and you read the label and they specifically say they have anticholinergics in them, make sure that you're taking another approach. In any of these things I just mentioned, like whether it's trying to sleep better at night, like look to magnesium, look to using melatonin, look to changing your lifestyle up. If you have the the cold or the flu. Like, you want to just boost your immune system. You don't need all these different goofball cold medicines out there. Antihistamines. I mean, geez, focus on using some natural stuff like stinging nettle, N-acetylcysteine, all the different natural antihistamines out there. So make sure that you're doing the right things in focusing on natural health. Now, your cup of coffee, it's shedding trillions of plastic nanoparticles into your body every single day. There's new research that shows the paper cups of Joe that you grab from the coffee house counter contains another ingredient, and it's one that you might not care for: trillions of tiny plastic particles that leach into your hot Java, and then of course you drink it. And this is coming from the plastic lining. Single-use paper cups are lined with a thin plastic film that helps keep liquids hot and prevent them from leaking through the cardboard. The lining releases more than 5 trillion plastic nanoparticles per liter when hot liquid is poured into a 12-ounce single cup. Okay, this is pretty interesting, and this is coming from the Environmental Science and Technology Journal. And so basically, you want to make sure that you're using like stainless steel, glass, ceramic, anything, but stay away from the plastics. And the fact is it's not just like coffee cups, like storing your food in plastics. You want to get away from all of that, because there's actually new science that shows that these nanoparticles are getting into the cell and is causing cellular dysfunction. It's leading into inflammatory problems, autoimmune crises, and even cell death. Okay, so we want to make sure that we're staying away from the plastics. Now, another piece that's pretty interesting is the FDA is actually restricting the Johnson & Johnson COVID-19 vaccine over the risk of blood clots. Now, if you followed this at all and you followed some of the stuff I've been talking about, this isn't the first time that they've done this, okay? And like, honestly, the first time they did it, like, it shouldn't have happened again. It literally is something that they found that it was causing blood clots. They should have just pulled it and called it a day. But the fact is that they're so desperate for everybody to be injected with this crap that they are literally letting people go and put their life at risk when maybe their life wasn't at risk to begin with. I mean, think about it. Like, the risk of death for somebody who's younger due to COVID is very, very low. So the fact is that maybe you're actually increasing your risk of having a severe outcome far more by actually taking this. So, it comes down to something I said early on: play stupid games, win stupid prizes. I mean, like, honestly, if you're going to know full well that these shots cause blood clots, but you're going to allow people to use them anyway, and then come back like a year down the road and say, oh, actually, even though we determined that they caused blood clots before, and then we pulled them, and then we gave them back to you to use, you're going to come back a year later and tell people, surprise, they're actually bad for you again. Like, it's really crazy. So there's a lot of craziness going on, but honestly, I mean, I've said this from the beginning too, and I'm saying from the beginning of COVID, if you are dabbling in this stuff, you are a lab test subject, because the fact is this stuff has no long-term studies on it, and the science behind it is very sparse, to say the least. Now, there's another interesting thing out, and that's a bill that seeks to muzzle doctors who are telling the truth. And I thought this was pretty interesting simply because I actually have a friend who's going through the process of losing her license right now, simply because she believed in, when a COVID patient came in, that they should have a natural form of treatment for their COVID. She believed that she would spread the message of natural health during the time of COVID. Well, her medical board determined that that was not her ability to do. So basically, what this whole article by Dr. Mercola goes into explain to us is that there's many bills being passed that are literally saying if doctors go on and speak anything other than what the pharmaceutical companies are telling them to, then they run the risk of losing their license, right? So if your pharmaceutical company says, no, our Pfizer vaccine is completely healthy and safe to say, but a doctor says, no, I disagree with that, they could run the risk of losing their license, okay? And if you actually look at some of the provisions of some of these bills that are being pushed, like along the lines of misinformation and a doctor's ethical obligations and everything in between, it basically just says, like, look, doctors don't have a right. Well, my goodness, the doctor is the one who's protecting you from the pharmaceutical companies who are just big corporate monsters looking to make money at all costs. Like, the doctor is the person who's supposed to be protecting you, not the government, not the pharmaceutical corporate interests. and even the government who's getting lobbying money from all these companies. It's the doctor who's supposed to protect you. Now they're trying to change this so that the doctor can't actually have a say in the matter. Unbelievable stuff here. So once again, make sure you're finding good doctors and you're standing up for your doctor if this stuff comes up, because you very well may be voting on this stuff. And a lot of people will see these, misinformation bills around doctors and think, oh, this is a good thing because if there's a doctor out there that's, speaking on, some nonsense, and a doctor who's giving bad information and telling people to eat dirt in order to protect themselves from COVID, we want to know about it. But the fact is, it's truly not that. It's like doctors are like, hey, look, you can use NAC, you can use these natural forms of therapies in order to help overcome these problems. They're the ones who are being silenced. So if these things come up, make sure that you're voting appropriately. Now, the next thing here is 10 more states report mysterious hepatitis outbreaks in children. If you're not familiar with this, hepatitis is basically liver failure, liver disease, okay? Once again, it's hard to say why this is happening. There's no clear reason as of right now, but I think the point that I wanted to make about this with all these hepatitis outbreaks in children, the fact is that you're playing games with people's health. With all the shots out there right now, you are playing games, and as of right now, they're talking about severe neurological consequences of these shots, severe autoimmune consequences of these shots. We're seeing hepatitis outbreaks, and I'm not going to link those to the shots because there's not proof of that. But the fact is that you're going to see all these crazy health problems start to come up. And because the government was so involved with these shots, and because the pharmaceutical companies are basically, funding everything and they have all the money, you're never going to see it blamed or put back on them, right? I mean, there's actually laws that say that you can't blame them for stuff. So you'll never see this go full circle, but what you may see happen is that in the news, you'll start seeing, oh, all these crazy health conditions are popping up. And it may just be a blame of COVID in general. Like, oh, COVID caused all these neurological conditions in people. COVID caused, these inflammatory and brain issues and autoimmune issues. But the fact is, it could actually be really the shot that caused them. So anyway, we have to look out for this kind of stuff. And, it's sad that it's happening in children, but unfortunately, many people are subjecting their children to these, to these different therapies out there that are experimental at best, so you have to make sure that you're making the proper choices for your child, because your child has to pay the consequences of the choices that you make for them. And also you're the one who has to live with them. Okay. These are big decisions to make as a parent. I remember in the hospital, and I tell this story all the time, but when we were going through the process, and my daughter was born and everything, and the doctors wanted to do things that I didn't agree with, I said to them, I said, like, hey, I don't agree with this. And, you guys said that there wouldn't be a problem if I didn't want to go and, follow through with some of these different things that you're wanting to do here. And one of the nurses, that was the head nurse, she said, look, this is your child, and you are responsible for whatever consequences come out of any decision that is made. Not anybody here, not a doctor, not a pediatrician, not another nurse, not a hospital staff, nobody. You are responsible for those consequences, and you have to live with it. So the same goes for you. These are your children. You're responsible for their life, the consequences of the decisions that you allow their doctors to make for them. So think wisely and make sure that you're making good choices for your child's safety. Now, I also want to mention, I started a brand new YouTube channel. I think you'll really appreciate it. Just kind of discovering a whole diversity, large diversity of topics. And not only would I appreciate your support over there, but also go give some watches to these videos and put some comments in there. I think you'll really like it. You can find my new YouTube channel right over here.